Good afternoon, Jessica.
Good afternoon, Michelle. How are you?
I'm awesome. How are you feeling today?
I am also awesome.
I love it. I love your energy. I love when we first met, I loved your energy and I loved your enthusiasm for the work that you do. I was so excited when you said, yes, I'll come on your show and we'll talk about empowering our teens. So thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Awesome. So, a little bit about my series before we dive in and start talking about ways that we can support our teens and help them master themselves. I created Michelle's Conversations That Matter to elevate the conversation around mental health, to educate, inspire, motivate people, to openly talk about brain health because there's too many people suffering in silence and we have a stigma. So that's what I've been doing with my series, hosting people like yourself, experts in your field, and also storytellers. What I do professionally is I work with organizations to create cultures of compassion and resilient workforces. So I get in there and really look at what they're already doing and help them turn up the volume when it comes to emotional well-being and an engaged workforce. So that's what I do, but we are here to talk to you about the great work that you have done globally, your passion for helping our youth, and today about your program that does empower teens to master themselves. So before we get into that topic, can you do us a favor and just introduce yourself, Jessica, who you are, where you live, and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I live near Cincinnati, Ohio, and I have been teaching at Miami University for 6 years. I teach through teaching English to international students. I realized that 19-year-olds, despite their status as adults, aren't actually that mature. Shocking, I know. And I also raised my children in a method I called deliberate parenting. So I was very interactive and I had a mission statement that related to raising my own children. And that mission statement guided my actions every day as a parent. And I can say briefly that mission statement was, I raise mentally, emotionally, and physically healthy children to become productive, well-adjusted adults. Because you can't just say, my child will be a doctor. It doesn't work that way. So that's a little bit about myself. I've been teaching in international education around the world for 20 years, at least.
Wow, that's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah. The other thing that's relevant is that when my children were young, I volunteered in their schools often. And I worked hand in glove with our educational system. I did consider homeschooling, but I felt like my son was a little stubborn and we benefited by working with the school system together.
Got it. What had you gravitate to doing the work that you do, and why is this work so personal for you?
It's very personal to me, going way back to my own childhood, that for the tiny town that we lived in rural Maine, we were upper middle class. Not that we would have been considered that today or in New Jersey, but in rural Maine. And my brother has become and has been a crack addict for 30 years. And my formative teen years were spent grieving because he's a little older than me. And I just watched him become that advertisement for this is your brain and this is your brain on drugs.
Yeah.
And I grieved that loss for many years. I haven't spoken with him in over 10 years, but that's why it's very personal to me that teenagers really need a very specific form of guidance. And that memory has always fed my passion for empowering teens to become their best selves.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, that's great. And I think we always want to know the backstory of, how people get to where they are and what drives them personally to want to do this work. So let's talk about empowering our teens, especially now. I get so upset when I see articles. I just recently posted something on LinkedIn about adolescent mental health and the CDC data citing that 63% of 18 to 24-year-olds are reporting symptoms of anxiety, depression, with 25% reporting increased substance use and 25% saying that they'd seriously considered suicide. You combine that with the number of adolescent suicides that have been, taking place, the numbers just keep climbing, and it's really, really concerning, and parents are worried, and we're living in a pandemic, and kids cannot access the social connections that they used to. So, you've developed a system to help teens master themselves. First of all, do you want to say anything about the statistics about what I shared, and then can you go into sharing with us this program that you have discovered and sort of why you created it?
Sure. So the statistics are alarming, but not surprising. And it is more evidence that we should not have a stigma against mental health seeking. And I have never had the stigma, and I have passed that on to my children deliberately. If you have a teenager, do you want your teenager only getting the advice of other 16-year-olds in their dramas of breakups and she was rude to me? And no is the answer. We seek professional help in every area of our life. But for some reason, some people are like, I'm not going to counseling. That's not good. And, I'll also say that my mother died when I was a child, and I immediately started going to counseling. Like, if you have grief and you're a child, you need to work through that with a professional, or especially even as an adult.
Yeah.
I was an adult when my father died. I still went to counseling to process all of that emotion. So those statistics are not surprising, and it's more evidence as to, I don't understand why we have a stigma. I don't have the stigma, and it's just nonsense that we're not teaching. I mean, we can start with emotional awareness in 5-year-olds. They go to kindergarten, they throw a fit. You ask them, tell me, what are you feeling right now? Just make them aware of their own emotions.
Yeah.
And I made sure for my son to deliberately instill the idea, it is okay to cry.
Yeah.
Do not feel bad about crying. We all have to process these emotions. And like, I have a video out there about how when my son got accepted to the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, my father was this is a bit about grief, but my father was a World War II decorated officer, and he had wanted me to go to the Air Force Academy, and I was accepted, but I didn't want to go. There was no shame in that, but I remembered it. And then when my son did want to go to an academy and he got in, I started crying like a water faucet. And it's just tears were running down my face, and snot's coming out of my nose. I can't form words. And I find my son, I said, you've been accepted. And he's like, isn't that a good thing? But like, grief just hits you sometimes. And I can laugh at myself now and just be okay with those moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a good example. I say it all day long. We have to model what it looks like to be expressive, emotional, and not conceal it, because otherwise it, creates a different message.
Yes. And so now I'll get into a little bit how I created my system and why. Okay. So I did tell you that I discovered that teenagers aren't that mature. And although I knew that beforehand because I had been raising teenagers, and I deliberately had many values-based programs for them. I am an educator, so I came up with how to lead a values-based life for my own kids. I involved them specifically in different events, like going to museums to keep them active, or going to the theater, Obviously, not just sports. Sports are part of getting rid of negative energy and staying fit, but there were many programs that I involved my children in to help them become well-rounded and well-adjusted. So I had, through my own experience as a mother, worked with teen programs, or, the germ was there from my own self. But then as I started working with privileged youth from around the world, I'm talking the children of the richest people and the most powerful people on earth are my students.
Wow.
And I've noticed some really alarming things, like these things. Okay, so some of the alarming things. There was a student who had never driven,
Okay.
and he had never read about driving. He had never thought about driving.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has a friend who has a Maserati. And that friend didn't care to ask whether this kid had thought about driving ever in his life, because privileged youth grow up knowing that the rules don't apply.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to save money for a car. They don't have to save money for college. They don't need to worry about their careers. They're just having fun.
Right.
And so then they think that the other life rules that are like natural laws don't apply. So the one student who didn't ask any questions handed the keys to the other student. Within 100 feet, that student plowed the Maserati into a minivan, sending 4 children and their parents to the hospital. And so it's really important to me for privileged youth to understand that natural laws do apply to them. There was another case where 3 students had never been swimming, had never learned how to swim. They got on a boat. And after they got on the boat, they decided to go swimming. Like the laws don't apply. So they're no longer with us.
Yeah.
And so the consequences of not teaching these laws of brain and heart can be death.
Right.
Now, those are 2 extreme cases.
Sure.
But so I started years ago working with, like, I was just Googling Stephen Covey stuff, 7 habits of highly effective people.
Yeah.
Think and win, be results oriented, active listening skills, which are not, necessarily a Stephen Covey thing. Then I have them all take the Myers-Briggs test, because you can take it for free now. And they learn a little bit about being introverted or being extroverted and where they are on that scale. But also they learn to they learn how to get along with people who are not the same type of personality. So, like, I tell a funny story of how at the end of the day, I'm an introvert. I'm the extroverted introvert, but I am introverted. Mm-hmm. And so at 7:00 in the morning, one of my colleagues came running into my office. She was so excited. Jessie, we're going to have a great day. And I was like, back up. Let me have my coffee and I'll be out in a few minutes. Like, and I can say that laughingly, because, once you're a little introverted and the other people are more extroverted, then you can both get along better.
Right.
I also teach conflict mitigation, conflict resolution. Teenagers are not prepared for breakups, and they're not prepared to fight with their friends, but teenagers don't act like adults. Right. So they need to be deliberately taught. I know some parents who would say, oh, I just let them work it out. No, don't let them work it out unless they have skills to work it out.
Yeah.
And so I do a lot of conflict mitigation and resolution. The other thing that is a part of the program is debate. And you'll laugh at this because you're going to know what I'm going to say. So debate is a tool for civil disagreement based on evidence. And I think that we should go to Congress and remind them what debate actually is. And we should go to all the news stations, because I'm not sure where the facts or the evidence is anymore. And civility has gone out the window.
I know. Yeah. Absolutely. So, so that's a little bit about your system, I guess. You're like, to help them master themselves. You're concerned about helping them be empowered with some of the fundamental tools, knowledge, and education to be able to navigate those things and not leave it up to fate, to just have them figure it out.
And how to become, there's a scale of passive, and it's very common in girls because we're taught to be compliant and docile little things. If you're passive and you don't ever tell anyone that you're upset, that resentment builds and builds and builds until it explodes and you become passive aggressive. And that's random. Or those moments can be random, like it just builds and builds and builds and then boom.
Yeah.
And the other end of that is people who are overly aggressive with their dominance or with their opinions. My opinion's right, and so you have to balance both of them and help people come to the middle to where they can be assertive,
right,
peacefully, and say, I'm not happy with what you just told me. It's a very simple statement, but it's also very empowering. Like, if you can say that, maybe you can prevent yourself from punching someone in the face.
Right. Violence. Yeah. Before we went on the air, we were talking a little bit about, the common concerns right now around kids. Parents are concerned about their kids, right? They're not getting what they normally, they're out of their routine. They have some type of return to school and hybrid learning that they're doing, but many of them can't return to like the normal yet because of this pandemic. And we spoke a little bit about, kids and their overall well-being, and parents do have concerns about their well-being. What advice do you have? Because this comes up all the time. Parents are just like, I don't know what to do, or I think something's wrong. What advice do you have for parents out there who might be concerned about their kids?
Those are really good questions, Michelle. And so I'm going to start by saying it's not about kids getting taller in your house. It's about what happens inside of them. And as a parent, it behooves you to educate yourself on how to deal with children who are growing and how to help them mentally progress, because they live in your house. And one of the other theories I have is, and it's actually, it's proven true for me actually, that either spend energy and time up front and proactively with raising these creatures who are becoming independent. And in particular, they're trying to become independent from you because you're the parent and they don't want to be like you. And that's okay. They're not supposed to be like, you. It's a new generation. Actually, the world is theirs and they need the skills to deal with the world. But as a natural process of becoming independent, they're going to give you kickback because they're not going to do anything the way you did it. And you're going to hear, Mom, we don't do it like that anymore. Don't you know what, Instagram is? Oh my goodness. But if you can proactively manage these things then you're ahead of the game. And if you don't, then you're going to spend money on the back end with more counseling, and it's likely to be negative.
Yeah.
So proactive and positive, or reactive and negative at the end. And so I spent a lot of time deliberately with my children, helping them gain all of these skills that they need. And I have always had them in counseling. In particular, my daughter, and I've been in counseling in most of my life because I wanted her to have advice from other than 13 to 16-year-olds.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I encourage counseling, especially if, like right now, my counseling through my health plan is free. they're not charging anything for mental health counseling in COVID, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
And there are some other simple rules that help guide thoughts for youth. There's so many, but one, for example, is Benjamin Zander quoted the art of possibility. And what that means is if you spend all of your time thinking about things that you don't control, AKA pandemic,
Yeah.
then you're filled with fear. You don't know what to do because you don't control the pandemic.
Right.
And it just really just sits on you like this bag of bad chemicals that just starts running through your body. But if you help your child focus on what is possible, do what you can,
Yeah.
then children are engaged in productive activities, whatever that means.
Yes.
And the chemicals in their bodies are different because they feel like they have some control.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I have said is maybe we didn't want to be online right now, Michelle.
Right.
But at this pivotal moment in history, it is a privileged point of connection that some people don't have.
Yeah.
Perspective is everything. I'm really happy to be with you today. And if the situation wasn't the way it is, maybe I would have never met you and had this great conversation. So kind of redirecting them to appreciate. And there are many, many healthy habits. All you have to do is you can Google 10 healthy habits. And I mean, it's that easy.
Yeah.
Walking in nature is healthy. It grounds you.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had students say things like, I'm going to take a gap year. And I'll say, well, what does that look like for you? Well, what do you mean? I'm going to play video games. And I'll say, well, you're not going to travel the world. Why don't you just Zoom and improve your life? Improve your brain. And so also checking them with their own thought process.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't sound like it makes sense to you, then check them on that. Other easy, healthy habits besides walking in nature, any form of exercise, especially for males with all that extra energy that they have.
Yes, testosterone, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. I mean, we are not brains walking around on a brain transportation device. We are physical creatures who need to build our muscles to keep our bones strong and healthy. So in addition to those two things, I'm thinking of, so those are just, people have to do things.
Yeah.
Like I can't tell you how many people I have worked with who gave 10 books to their kids and said, go sit and study. No, that's just demoralizing.
Yeah.
And they need your time. They need your attention.
Yeah.
If they don't get positive attention, they're going to get negative attention.
Mm-hmm. Really, really good advice. I love everything that you just shared. And I want to go back to the original point that you made around the fact that you can do something on the back end. It's sort of like our physical health, right? Like you can put good in up front and feel good, or you can put garbage in and then have to course correct on the back end. So I love that proactive approach to well-being and putting the good stuff in so that you don't have to course correct. And the other thing that I love that you shared early on is we seek experts for everything in our lives. If our car is broken, we go to an expert. If our washing machine is broken, we call in an expert. Why are we so hesitant to call in a mental health professional if we feel like we need support? I really loved that analogy that an expert is an expert regardless.
And even before there's an emergency, we get the oil changed in our car to prevent problems.
Yes.
And having the tools to deal with these teenage breakups and She was rude to me. He was rude to me. Having the tools to deal with that,
Yeah.
to practice becoming assertive. I'm not comfortable with that.
Right.
How many bad situations could be prevented
Yes.
if a teenager was strong enough to simply state, not passively and not aggressively, I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And then on the other end, learning to respect those statements.
Yeah.
And the idea, and I want to talk about bullying here.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it.
Because anybody can be a bully. And people want to think, oh, I'm not a bully. But if you ever teased anyone, then you have been a bully. And the point is not to say you're a bully. The point is to say that each of us has it in us to be unkind, especially when we're young and we don't have as many skills for coping with everything. And I heard students once, it was a silly thing, but a kid said, I go by the name Will. And this other kid said, Billy, 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 Billy. And Will said, no, that's not funny. And the kid said, Billy, 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 Billy. And the kid's like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
And the kid kept at it.
Yeah.
They ended up in a fist fight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, you are acting like a bully. That is bully behavior.
Sure.
He goes, I'm not a bully. I said, well, I'm glad that you don't want to be a bully, but your behavior was not appropriate.
Yeah.
And so I want to demystify that term bully because, own it if you've acted in a small way like a bully so that you can be responsible
Right.
and not do it again.
Right.
And that brings up another key component of this. This statement comes from one of our founding fathers. It is, there is no freedom without responsibility. An easy one for teens is they learn how to drive and then they obtain the freedom of a driver's license and possibly, if they're lucky, a car.
Right.
That freedom comes with inherent responsibilities.
Yes.
You cannot just drive on the wrong side of the road.
Right.
You can't not stop at a red light.
Right.
And so that's an easy analogy that I took through the entire teenage years of my children, and I still teach to students today, is there is no freedom without responsibility.
Yeah.
And if you break your responsibility, if you wreck your car, then you lose your freedom.
Right. Right. Really, really good analogy there. I love that. I think that's so important. What, you've done work across the globe. Like when I first met you and we sat down, you were telling me about all of these amazing, dealing with just different cultures and different global communities. What other work are you up to? And is there anything that you want to share around what else you're up to?
Thanks for asking, Michelle. I this morning at 1 a.m. I presented on unemployment in India, and then later this morning, I taught in China and in Colombia, and then I went to Macedonia and did a conference on the student-centered approach.
Wow.
So when COVID started, actually in January of last year, the first student tested was in my classroom.
Oh, wow.
That was on a Monday. On Tuesday, we were online. And so I was sitting around, instead of running all over campus and doing all of these active projects that I am engaged in, I was sitting in my office. And I too was filled with fear and anxiety.
Sure.
And so my response, knowing that I needed to move myself out of a sense of fear and move myself to a place where I felt like I could do something, I founded Mindset News. You can say Mindset Growth was the first name. So I founded Mindset News to inspire youth around the world to continue their education despite the chaos. So on any given weekend, I'm teaching in Myanmar or Pakistan or Iraq, I have great respect for people in developing nations, and
Sure.
I believe that we all have to rise together.
Mhm.
If one country succeeds and 10 fail, then we all fail.
Yes.
Co-rising, I call it.
I love that. Oh my gosh, so amazing. Do you ever bridge the gap between um, like underserved countries and like the affluent, I guess that you mentioned earlier? Do you ever try to bridge them to sort of get each other's worlds?
Absolutely. That are like the perfect question. So one of my specialties is project-based learning, and I will take these naive, privileged youth who good for their parents. Their parents have protected them from every evil.
Hmm.
Um, but at that same token, now they're out in the real world and they need to be aware of the world. So I'll take them into a marginalized elementary school in Ohio, and they read and perform stories with these underserved youth. And I literally have heard more than once a 6-year-old say to a privileged college student from another country, "My mommy died this weekend of an overdose." And those kinds of experiences where they come together to perform the the fairy tales, like the Three Little Pigs, they are transformational for both ends of the spectrum. I think it's very important. And I've created a program out of Dubai this summer where I'm going to take royal youth and we're going to go around the world mining the intellectual landmarks like ancient history, the Enlightenment, and we're also going to go into refugee camps and give gifts to the children in refugee camps
Wow.
to help them in their own leadership world.
It's amazing. I love it. I love the work you're doing and the difference that you're making. It's really inspiring. I'm just like, my mind is blown by this. So what anything that you want to share that you're up to, and if people are interested in connecting with you, we have at the bottom of the screen the ticker going by. They should just go to Mindset News either on Facebook or YouTube is the best way to sort of keep up with you. But anything else that you want to share that you're up to that we should know about?
Well, Mindset News takes a lot of my time. I've moved into these peace conferences, um, and I'm helping. And if anybody wants to help, to teach around the world, so I'm working with Queen Nadia Hariri, the Queen of Hawaii. She founded Success World One, and their website is developing to teach around the world for free. And it's just an instantaneous revolution. I teach with her on Saturdays. I've been looking for a way for quite some time to help teachers in particular in the different countries in Africa because they need the training a lot. But so I'm teaching teacher training on Saturdays around the world. And then I'm teaching habits for success also around the world. And you can find those links on, you'll find them on my stations, or rather on the Facebook pages. And you can also in Facebook search for Success World One. There's one for Asia, Spanish. There are a bunch of different Success World Ones, and their website will be up soon.
Amazing. You're also on Clubhouse, right?
Oh, yes, I am in Clubhouse.
Yeah, so you're chatting it up in Clubhouse. So how do people connect with you there? Just your name?
Yes, and I'm very active in Spice Nation, which is a group that's focused on influence for impact.
Yes.
And I'm not just trying to be out there influencing people. I'm influencing for impact.
Yes.
And, I think we met via Kurt Walker, actually.
I think we did. Now we're trying to piece it together. I'm like, how did I meet you? I think I did meet you through my wonderful Spice Nation. I love that community of amazing human beings out to make an impact. So awesome, awesome. All right, my dear. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful that you spent some time with me today. The work you're doing is truly inspiring and impactful. And I'm so grateful to know you, and I want to follow you. And thank you for who you are in the world.
Yeah, well, thank you for who you are in the world. The more voices about this subject, the better.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica. Take good care of yourself.
You too, Michelle. Thank you.
Bye-bye.